I'm going to just bear with me really quickly while I get my presentation up and loaded. But good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Let's go here. Okay, can we all see that? Everybody good? Awesome. Okay. Like Kate said, my name is Katya Kazemka. I am an admissions counselor from the University of Maryland, College Park. I hope everyone is having a good start to their summer and they are bearing with this heat as best they can. We are hopefully, so what I hear, it's going to cool down a little bit for tomorrow, so we can all get a little bit of relief from that. But I'm going to talk quite a bit about the University of Maryland today. I got a bunch of stuff to talk about and sort of the application process that you will ultimately be able to, involve yourself in this fall, what that looks like, what the timeline is going to be, what are things you need to make sure you get done, and how to sort of best set yourself up for success. And sort of, don't back yourself into any corners that, are avoidable and things like that. But before I get into all of that, a little bit more about me and what my job is and what I do, because I think, admissions counselor can be kind of a vague title. And so like, what exactly is it that my job is? What's my role in your process and all of that kind of stuff? I am one of many admissions counselors for the University of Maryland. There's a whole team of us. But specifically where you are concerned, I do cover Montgomery County. So what that means when I say I cover Montgomery County is I do things like this. So when, your schools want somebody from UMD to come speak to you or to talk about UMD, I go to every high school in Montgomery, every public high school in Montgomery County during the sort of fall months to talk to juniors and seniors and sort of about the application process and what all of that kind of stuff. That's my whole shtick for those couple of months. I do read applications. That is part of what my position entails. It is worth noting, I don't necessarily read your applications. That's not the way our process works at UMD. So while I oversee Montgomery County in terms of sort of events and recruitment style things, and if you're at a college fair, it's me who's behind the table, all of those sorts of things. I'm not necessarily reading your application specifically. It's possible I am, but they go out relatively randomly. So there's a good shot that I am not necessarily reading your application. So worth keeping that in mind as we sort of go throughout this process. But the other thing that I do is I'm your go-to contact if you have questions or concerns throughout the application process. I am your counselor's contact when they have things that come up throughout the process. They reach out to me, but you reach out to me as well. And I really encourage students, and I will throughout this sort of entire time, that if you have questions or you're unsure about something, it's always better to ask. And we'll get to that sort of later on in this presentation, but you can always reach me via applymaryland@umd.edu. Everything goes through a centralized email, and this is really important because it creates it allows us, it basically connects us to all of the other messages that you have sent. So I can see if you've sent multiple emails or if you've talked to somebody else before or all that kind of stuff is really important that you send it to those. But it does come to me, and I promise that it will end up to me. You can put my name. It's on this, it's on my screen right now. And things like that. And your counselors have it as well. You can put my name in the subject line, or you can address the email to me when you are emailing Apply Maryland, or you can say you're from Montgomery County. That will also send it straight to me. But I point that out in sort of that's what my role is in this process. I am mostly here primarily as a resource for you and your schools sort of throughout this. And that's what we're here today to do, to sort of provide some resourcing for you all. Okay. I'll get the show on the road. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the sort of University of Maryland by the numbers and statistics of things. I think by and large, most of you are familiar with the general scheme of things and how, have a general idea of what the University of Maryland is. Many of you likely have been to campus or been around campus or know people who have gone to UMD. But this is just some sort of numbers that may be of interest to you. This is being recorded, so you can always go back and find this, but all of these are also available, sort of generally speaking and things like that. I think some things I do like to highlight here is our academic majors. We have over 100 academic majors, and that does come into play sometimes within the application process. And I'll get to that in a minute or two. We have over 300 study abroad options. I get asked a lot about study abroad and the sort of opportunities to that. Is it limited by major? Is it not? All those sorts of things. It's not. There's over 300, lots of things to choose from. But those are some numbers that I like to throw out there with this sort of slide. But I'll keep it moving. I won't spend too long talking about these. And this is where I think the majors bits come into effect. And I'll start talking a little bit about the application process right here and now. There are at the University of Maryland 12 schools, colleges, right? At many schools, and you may hear this, you may have heard this from other schools, you may, be vaguely familiar with the idea of it from UMD, but many large universities are broken up into individual schools and colleges to sort of, most of the time it's for bureaucratic purposes, right? It's to help sort of organize large scale universities. We have a 30,000 student undergraduate population. So this sort of helps us, keep students in line. It helps departments have, sort of a clear, sort of hierarchy that they, can get up to university leadership and all those sorts of things. It just helps organize everything a lot more simply, right? What this doesn't impact is your application itself. And I'll talk about limited enrollment programs, which you've probably been familiar with in a minute or two. But you do not, when you apply to the University of Maryland, you are not picking out one of these schools to apply to. At some universities and colleges that have multiple schools and things like that, you are picking one specific one to apply to that may have differences in their application or specific supplements and things that you need to provide. We do not have that at the University of Maryland. When you apply to UMD, you apply to UMD. College Park at large. There is not, these schools do not have individual applications or anything along those lines. The last one down here, because you'll notice there are 13 bullet points, and I said that there are 12 schools and colleges, is Letters and Sciences. Letters and Sciences is not an academic college because you cannot graduate with a degree from Letters and Sciences. They are not a degree granting school, college. There's no majors within undergrad Letters and Sciences. What Letters and Sciences is the advising home for students who are undecided or in a pre-major status. And I'll talk about pre-major status when I talk about limited enrollment programs in a minute. So we'll set that to the side for the moment. But because you don't have to apply to a specific school or college, and we don't admit by major, which I'll talk about again in a moment, you can apply undecided, and many students do. And that is sort of where you live until you have picked a major in Letters and Sciences. They have resources to help you decide on a major, to help you figure out what it is you want to study. If you have career goals, but you don't necessarily know how that would align with a sort of area of study or a specific major, they can help you sort of determine that. If you're interested in a variety of different things, but you don't really know what you want to do with those, that's what Letters and Sciences has, the resources to help you sort of figure that out while you are at UMD. It's not necessarily something you have to have sorted out before you even start. But this is probably more of an impact in sorts of the application process itself, and these are our limited enrollment programs. So I said earlier, we have over 100 majors at UMD, right? The vast majority of them, everything but what you see on the screen right now, is what we call open enrollment majors. So everything except for these, which are the limited enrollment majors. An open enrollment major means if you are admitted to the university and you would like to be in that major, you are in that major. There is no application process. There's no hoops you have to jump through, none of those sorts of things. Everything aside though from what is on the screen right now is an open enrollment major. So these are the ones up here that are not open enrollment. So that means there are additional admission criteria related to these programs. There's a couple of things I want to talk to you about specifically with limited enrollment programs and coming out of high school and what that means for you and your sort of, whether you are trying to decide if you need to take certain classes or do XYZ and things like that, and what this actually means. So the vast majority of these programs, everything except business and computer science, are what we call non-competitive limited enrollment programs, which sounds contradictory because I just told you they limit enrollment, but now I'm saying it's non-competitive, and that can be really confusing, and I understand that. So I'm going to try to break it down for you in a way that hopefully makes sense and I have found can be, kind of helpful in understanding it. So all of these programs are basically popular majors. You've probably heard of pretty much everything on the screen, right? They're majors that, many students are interested in and a lot of students, want to do. So as such, they limit the enrollment in those programs to make sure that they have, class spaces, professor availability, the advising resources, all of those sorts of things within those majors to be able to best serve the students that are studying those things. For everything except business and computer science, there is a firm series of guidelines that you have to meet. And they vary from major to major, so they're not the same for every single one, but there is a full list on the website that is, sort of there on the slide, lep.umd.edu, has the full list of each, sort of one's requirements. It's important to note these requirements are not for you to have completed in high school. They are requirements that you complete at UMD. And that gets confusing sometimes because they look at this list. You might look at this list and go, for engineering, for example, and go, well, I haven't taken calculus yet. Do I have to take calculus in order to, be able to be directly admitted into engineering? Not necessarily the case, although if you can take calculus, that's probably not a bad idea. But, it doesn't mean you have to have taken those courses in high school. They are requirements that you meet in college, and they are usually, we call them gateway requirement courses. You take, it's 3, sometimes 4 classes that are basically introductory level classes. For engineering, for example, I don't know the specific, all of them across the top of my head, but you have to take basically like the introductory engineering course, like the engineering 101. I'm not sure exactly what the course title is, so don't quote me on that. And, sort of calculus, physics, those sorts of coursework, that kind of basic level coursework that everybody who is interested in engineering will have to ultimately take and pass. And then there are minimum grades you need to get in those courses. Most of the time it's a B or above. There are some courses for some majors where it's a C or above. It depends on the course and the major. And then you need to, generally speaking, have an overall GPA of about a 3.0 or higher. And that's a college GPA, not a high school GPA. Now, as long as you meet those criteria for everything here, except for business and computer science, you're good to go. As long as you meet the criteria listed as the gateway requirement courses, you will be admitted to the major. You do have to fill out a form basically saying you would like to be in that major, an application. They do call it an application, but as long as you meet the criteria, you will be admitted to the major. And that is with all of the majors. So that's for engineering, that's for biochemistry, that's for biological science, that's for communication, neuroscience, psych, all of those sort of majors fall under that. The only ones who don't are, again, business and computer science. Business and computer science are both competitive. So that means they have gateway requirement courses like the others. So you do still have to take specific courses and meet minimum standards in them. But then there is still a competitive review on top of that, which is pretty similar to what you would think of as like an admissions review in the sense that you are submitting an application. Oftentimes you are writing, a personal statement of some kind as to why you would like to be in that major and things like that. All of this to say, that whole process is if you are not directly admitted into one of these majors, which you can be, which I know is probably just very confusing. And I just threw a lot of information at you, but hopefully, sort of, you don't even have to worry about that because that's later down the line. But it's really meant to sort of reassure you that if you are not directly admitted into a major, there are pathways, or if you don't know you want to be one of these majors and you decide later on, there are still ways for you to do that. If you are interested in one of these majors and for example, that you want to do engineering, you can apply when you apply to University of Maryland with engineering as your intended major. If you apply with engineering as your intended major, it does not impact your likelihood of getting into UMD. And that is true for all majors. No major is more or less likely. It's not going to help or hurt you in any admissions sort of review because we don't consider major in our admissions review. So that means when my office is reviewing an application, we are not looking at what your intended major is really at all. We're not looking, okay, this student wants to do engineering, so let's make sure they've taken XYZ class. We're not doing that in the review. We don't look at what you want your major to be. But I also just said you can be directly admitted into a program. So how does that work? When my office reviews you for a general admission, we ignore the major. We decide, are you admissible to UMD? Are we going to admit you? Yes or no? We say yes or no. If we say yes, and only if we say yes, do we take a look at what your major is. And then if you are one of these majors that's on the screen right now, you then go on to have a secondary review specific for that major. So in the engineering example, the engineering department has a sort of joint review with our offices, and they sort of ultimately go, the student is admitted to UMD, they want to be engineering. Are they going to be directly admitted to engineering? Yes or no? Whether or not they say you are directly admitted to engineering in this example, it does not impact your admissions decision. So our office has already made a decision by the time engineering, in this example, is looking at your application for admission to the engineering school. And like I said, if you get a yes from us and a no from them, you're still admitted to UMD. I mentioned that Letters and Sciences school before. That is where you will live if you choose to come to UMD, and then you can fulfill the gateway requirement courses and join engineering during your sophomore year. You are not behind if you do this, and I think that's something that a lot of people tend to be concerned about. If I don't get directly admitted to, we'll stick with the engineering example. If I don't get directly into engineering, am I going to be behind in my coursework? Am I going to graduate later than my peers? And that is not necessarily the case because first year coursework for engineering students, essentially, even if they are directly admitted, they are still taking the gateway requirement courses that you as a pre-engineering student are required to take as well. So you're not behind those students as long as you sort of know what as long as you have a plan, and are speaking with your advisor and are taking the things that you need to take during your first year, you are not necessarily behind students who are directly admitted. And I think that's an important thing to keep in mind when you're looking at those decisions and things like that. What can put you back a little bit is if you have no idea you want to do engineering until your sophomore year, and then you have to take those gateway requirement courses. If you didn't take them your freshman year, then yes, of course, that will impact, your graduation time and things like that. So things to keep in mind. Generally speaking. But that being said, I know that was a lot of information. I know that can be kind of confusing. If you have questions on them, I'm happy to sort of circle back to this when we're done presenting. And then of course, like I said, you can send emails, of course, about this information. But there's a lot of stuff out there about limited enrollment programs that can be very confusing. And I'm more than happy to sort of clear the air on any of those sorts of things. It is worth noting for the competitive programs of specifically computer science, that is an extremely competitive program. Even if you are looking to be directly admitted as a first year student, it's a very, very, very competitive program. There are a lot of students who want to, and they have a limited number of seats in that program to be able to sort of, well resource their students. So it is an extremely competitive program. And that is even within the context of UMD in general, it's very competitive. So I think that's worth keeping in mind. And the thing with computer science that I will say is if you are between majors, if you're not sure what you want to major in, but you think maybe you want to do computer science, that's like one of your things. This is the only instance in which I will tell you, you should absolutely apply with your freshman application with the computer science major, because all of these other majors, including business, there is a pretty straightforward pathway for you to enter the major later on if you change your mind about something. Computer science, while it is hard to get into as a freshman, is even more difficult to get into if you wait until you're at UMD and are looking to transfer into computer science later on. I'm not going to tell you it's impossible, because it's not impossible, but they have 100 spots every year for students who are changing into a computer science major. And that is both for students who are already at UMD and want to switch into computer science, and students who are transferring from community colleges or other four-year institutions that are transferring into UMD and want to be computer science as well. So it's a very, very, very limited amount of spots for those who want to change into computer science later. So if you are interested in computer science, I really, really, really strongly encourage you to apply with the computer science major. It is your best opportunity to be admitted into that major. I'm going to leave it there. We can circle back to LEPs and things like that and specific majors if you have questions later on. But we're going to keep it moving for the sake of time. I'm going to talk sort of generally admission now, how that process works, what you're going to need to submit, what are some things you need to keep in mind, and some sort of inside tips that I would say are the most important things that you can make sure you're doing for yourself as you are sort of leading up into this fall towards our early action deadline. We're on the Common App. You probably have heard of the Common App. I hope you've heard of the Common App. If you haven't, it's a general application form you can apply to a number of different schools. It's sort of using one basic application form and then filling out individual supplementals for each school. We are on the Common App. You can apply through us through there. That is the most common way that students apply. We do have a secondary application called Apply Web, which you can apply through as well. But vast majority of first year students are applying through Common App. It doesn't make a difference which one you do. They are the same application. The supplementals are exactly the same. The requirements are the same. So if you prefer one or the other, it makes no difference to us. It doesn't, sort of impact you. But we do see most of our applications come through the Common App. The Common App will open up for the fall 2026 sort of students who are applying to enter fall 2026 this coming August. It's usually in the beginning of August. I don't have an exact date right now. They are still finalizing our applications and things like that, but it is usually in early August, and you can submit it as soon as it is opened, essentially. And I'll talk a little bit about the timeline and dates that you should keep in mind. But Common App will open up in August, and that is when the earliest you are able to apply for the fall of 2026. These are the components that are going to go into your application. And this is probably one of the most important slides that I'm going to talk through today, and I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on it because the easiest way to get yourself into a situation that you don't want to be in is by missing something on this slide. I was mentioning, to Kate earlier, we have increasing numbers of applications every single year. We hit almost 70,000 students applied to the University of Maryland this past year. That is a really, really large number of applications. We don't have we have a pretty large staff. We have a lot of people who work at the University of Maryland in admissions, and we do a lot of stuff, and we're very, very busy, but we cannot track down 70,000 individual students one by one to make sure that they have XYZ. So the most important thing that you can do is pay attention, listen to your counselors, listen to me when I'm telling you what you need, and to keep on top of these things to make sure that you have everything that you need to have and that you don't end up missing out because you've just forgotten something. That's a really unfortunate way to, sort of miss out on, things. So this is what's required from you. The application form itself, which is Common App, essentially, or Apply Web, whichever one you've chosen. And then there's an application fee. It's $75. That there are fee waivers available. There are, if you need a fee waiver, there's a process built into Common App itself, or you can reach out for individual circumstances to our office as well. But that's something to keep in mind, but that's the first and foremost thing you have to do. You have to fill out the application form itself. The application form is going to include some of the other things that I'm going to go through, but that's Common App. That's what that means. You need 2 letters of recommendation for UMD, one from a teacher and one from a counselor. There has to be 1 teacher and 1 counselor. If you would like to submit a second teacher letter of recommendation, that's perfectly fine, but we do have to have one from your counselor. Your counselors probably already know this, but it is very important that you tell your counselors that you are applying to University of Maryland Early Action so that they know that they need to send their letters. Like, you need to be communicating. It's very important that you communicate what deadline you are applying for to your letters of people who are writing your letters of recommendation, because they're not necessarily, your teachers aren't necessarily going to know, okay, I need to know it by, do this student's letter by this date, make sure it gets sent out. The more that you can communicate with the people who are writing these letters for you, the better. If you have not already spoken to, if you're a rising senior and you've not already spoken to teachers who you think you might want to write letters of recommendation for you, I would recommend that you maybe think about that, because teachers, especially, sort of popular teachers or teachers who do teach subjects who students might be, they like to have, a math teacher or things like that. A lot of students do, especially if you're doing something, sort of STEM related and things like that. Those teachers get a lot of people who ask them, and not every teacher is going to be able to write, hundreds of letters of recommendation. So ensure you're, setting yourself up for success. Ask your teachers for letters of recommendation in a reasonable time frame. Do not ask a week before the deadline. That's not fair to your teacher. Get on that early. It's better for everyone, including you and your teacher, and you'll probably get a better letter of recommendation the earlier you ask as well. You need an official transcript from every high school that you have attended. This is extremely important because this is something that gets confusing and people miss this every single year. If you have transferred high schools, and that, like, if you lived in a different state and you transferred high schools, most importantly, if you lived in a different country and you transferred high schools, even if your grades are on your current Montgomery County transcript, we need the original transcript from your previous high school. Your current high school should have a copy of that transcript. We can certainly accept it from your current high school. That's perfectly fine. They can include it in the same document, however they want, separately, whatever they want to do with it, that's totally fine. But we do have to have a transcript from each high school you've attended. That's really important because this is something that comes up every single year where students don't realize that they needed, they spent ninth grade at a different place and they don't realize that, the transcripts are not there, and then they are missing something, and then they're not complete. And that is not a situation that you want to be in. If you are not sure whether you need to submit a transcript, one, you can ask, but I would say most of the time, the vast majority of the time, the answer is going to be yes, you should send us that transcript. So if you're not sure, err on the side of sending it to us. We're never going to be like, why did they send us this transcript? But that's not a situation that has ever happened. If you're not sure, have us send your transcripts. If you're not sure if your counselors know that you have multiple transcripts that they should have on file, speak to them, talk to them, talk to your school's sort of whoever is in charge of sending transcripts. Make sure that they have the copy. If you think, okay, well, I did 9th and 10th grade at this school. Now I'm at Bethesda Chevy Chase. I'm not sure if they have my transcript or not. You can find that out. You can, ask questions. That's a very important thing to do. Make sure you know what resources you have available to you and what you need to do to make sure that your application is complete. If you've taken dual enrollment courses, and those courses are not on your high school transcript. So sometimes they will be on your high school transcript. If they're on your high school transcript, you can still send us the dual enrollment transcript. It's never a bad idea to send it if you're taking, early college at MC, for example. It's never a bad idea to send your MC transcripts. We certainly will not say no. They're helpful to have. If they are not, however, on your high school transcript, you have to send them because that's academic information that then we don't have. The one thing that I will say is very important with college transcripts specifically is with summer programs. So if you've done a summer program at a college, there is an opportunity when you write those in on the Common Application to say whether or not that program was for credit, because some summer college programs will have credit involved, right? You might be getting a class or two of credit. If the summer program that you do has credit involved, you've taken a class or you've taken a couple of classes where you've gotten credit of some kind, you have to send us a transcript from that summer program. If the program is not credit bearing, if there's no credit involved in that summer program, you don't need to send us a transcript, but we don't necessarily know every summer college program that is in existence and off the top of our heads know whether it has credit or not. So when it asks you, when you're filling that information in on Common App, it's very important that you say for credit or not for credit. So we know whether or not, we can Google a summer program and we will if it's not clear. But there are programs where you can do a credit version or a not credit version. So it's really important that you include that information if it's not for credit. If you got a certificate for a program or something like that, you can certainly send those in and things like that. The more information, the merrier, honestly. When in doubt, send it to us is my sort of general piece of advice. But that's my sort of spiel on transcripts, and we can circle back to that if there's questions on that later on. For standardized test scores, we are still test optional. That is full, for if you are a rising senior or a rising junior, we are officially test optional through the fall for the class of 2027. If you are younger than that, we have not made official decisions beyond that, but that is, you heard it. If you haven't heard it by now, you're hearing it from me now. We are still test optional. I have the middle 50% data for both SAT and ACT scores in the next couple of slides. So we'll talk about sort of what scores you should think about submitting and what you should not think about submitting and things like that. But it is worth noting about 50% of our applicants do not submit test scores. And that statistic holds the same in our admitted student class as well. So it's roughly around 50% of our admitted students did not submit test scores. So when I say we're test optional and that it does not hurt you to not submit a score, I truly, sincerely mean it. If you are not sure if you want to submit your score, it doesn't hurt you not to submit it. I cannot tell you if you come to me and you say, hi, Katya, I have this SAT score. Should I submit it? I can't make that decision for you. I can't make that determination for you. I'm not going to give you a yes, you should submit that, or no, you should not submit that. I'm not going to give you that answer. That's not in my purview. What I can do is give you the information on our middle 50%, which I will do, and tell you that it will never hurt you to not submit a score. And generally speaking, if you are sitting wondering whether or not you should submit a score, I would generally say that probably means you should err on the side of caution, because if you submit the score, it has to be an official test score. So that means it has to come directly from College Board, directly from ACT. It has to be the official score. We will super score, worth noting, but it has to be the official score. And if you say yes on your application and then you do not send an official test score, you are incomplete. So when you are filling out that Common App and it asks you, do you intend to submit, you want your SATs or ACTs considered? If you say yes, we will not review your application until we have a completed score, an official score. So that's really important that you know what you want to do when you are submitting that application and that you stick to that decision. The other thing that I will say in terms of standardized test scores, because of our November 1st deadline, sometimes the October SAT scores come back in time for that deadline. Sometimes they do not. I personally would recommend that you not rely on an October SAT score if you are planning to submit scores. If you are only going to submit a score if your October SAT is a certain number, I would recommend against submitting those relying on that score. If you don't have a previous score that you are interested in submitting, that you would be okay with submitting, I would not say yes to submitting your test scores, because you never know what's going to happen with the October SAT. We had situations in previous years where tests got canceled and students didn't end up, being able to take an additional SAT, or, you never know what's going to happen morning of. Something weird, they're doing construction on your street and you don't get a good night of sleep before, you miss breakfast, you're running late, whatever. You never know what's going to happen on that date. I would not recommend that you rely on a test date that is going to be so close to the deadline that you don't really have an opportunity to change your mind. So that would be my recommendation as far as test scores are concerned. Like I said, we'll circle back to the middle 50% for both SAT and ACT. The activities and awards section, that is built into the Common App itself. So there's a whole section where you can add in all of the activities that you are involved in and awards that you have been given, throughout high school. This means everything that you've done from starting in 9th grade, anything that you're involved in within school, out of school, sports, clubs, jobs, community organizations, anything that you've been involved in, we would like to know about, because we do what is called a holistic review, and I'll talk about that a bit in a moment, but we like to see everything that you are doing. Your transcripts are going to tell us how you do in school, but it's not really telling us, anything about you as a human being. And, you are not, you have more hours in the day than those that you spend in your high school classroom. And we would like to know what you're doing with those hours. And, a little bit about you as a human being as well. And that is also where the essay comes in. So we do the standard Common App essay. There's no specific UMD essay prompt. So whatever essay that you are writing for general Common App sort of usage is perfectly fine for us. My biggest piece of advice with essays is have a couple other people read it before you submit it, whether that's a parent or a counselor or a friend or a boss or whoever. Have some other people get some eyes on it. And my biggest piece of advice in terms of topic, if you have not chosen one just yet, is that you do not write about anybody other than yourself. Writing about other people in your life is great. You may have great other people in your life that have impacted you or have, done things like that. But at the end of the day, we are not trying to admit your grandpa to UMD. We are trying to admit you to UMD. So we need to learn something about you in that essay. The most important thing that you're doing with that essay is giving us a sense of who you are. And that is best done if you are writing about a personal experience or something that you think is important about you. That's my piece for the essay. We don't have UMD specific essays, but we do have several short answer questions. They're really finish the sentence style questions. They are not essays by any means. You will be cut off. One sentence is fine. A couple of sentences is also fine. I think they're kind of fun questions, to be honest. If you know what they were in previous years, if you know people who've applied, they are staying roughly the same. They're not changing significantly. So there are things like, if you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go? What are you interested in outside of your academic major? What is something we might not know about you? Don't take it too seriously. They're not trick questions. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Like I said, we do want to know who you are as a human being. This is another opportunity to do those sorts of things. As far as when you've submitted all these things and you're like, did you get all these things? That's where the TERPS application portal comes in. You'll hear it referred to as TAP. We call it the TAP portal. It is very important that you keep a couple of things in mind and bear with us. One, the TAP portal is older than I am. It's not the most efficient platform. We're aware of this. I wish it was better. The reality of the situation is it takes 7 to 10 business days, which really means 2 weeks. It takes 2 weeks it can take that long for things to appear in your portal after we receive them. So that means if you submit something, particularly in their busy time, so in early October, if you submit something October 1st, there's a good chance that it doesn't show up until you're in your portal until something like October 14th, right? I understand that's not ideal. It's not ideal for us either. But that is simply the situation that we have with this portal currently. So that's important to keep in mind. Save yourself the anxiety. Do not expect something to be in the portal the day after you've submitted it. If you're very close to the deadline and it's not in the portal and you're not sure, that's when you can reach out to us. Please reach out to us before the deadline. We can't help you if you reach out after the deadline. But this is why I strongly recommend submitting everything before the middle of October, because it gives you that buffer time to know whether we've received that while still keeping in mind that it can take 7 to 10 days for things to show up in your portal. So I recommend early rather than later. It gives you that buffer time. If something goes missing, if something didn't make it where it was supposed to go, if somebody misspelled something, if we lost something, which happens, there's like I said, almost 70,000 applications. If something goes awry in some way, shape, or form, it's a lot easier for us to fix that if we know it before the November 1st deadline than if we are scrambling in, December or January or things like that. So keeping an eye on this. The other thing that is important to keep in mind is your application, when it says complete, is based on have you submitted a high school transcript? Have you submitted a teacher letter and a counselor letter? Have you submitted the application form? If you have a circumstance in which you need multiple high school transcripts, it won't necessarily pick up on that because it is not super specific for each individual. So it's very important that if you whether you need to submit additional things like a college transcript, because not every student is going to need a college transcript. So if you need a college transcript and you didn't submit one, it's not necessarily going to flag it, but it will say on your portal whether we've received a college transcript from you. It will list what we've received. So it's important that you keep an eye on those things and you know what you need to submit. If you're not sure, again, please ask. Please reach out to Apply Maryland. We will help you. We want to help you. It makes our lives easier if you know what you need in September and October, and we don't run into an issue in January when decisions are released and you didn't get a decision and nobody knows why. It's much easier to problem solve these things if we know earlier rather than later. So keep an eye on things. If you're not sure, ask. But I like to, sort of really emphasize, again, the November 1st deadline. If you are not aware, that is our early action deadline. It is our priority deadline. It is we have a much higher acceptance rate in our early action than we do in regular decision. It is also how you get considered for merit scholarships, all of our special programs. So the Honors College, the FIRE programs, which are first year research experiences, the College Park Scholars, all of those kinds of programs are invitation based, and you have to apply by November 1st. And apply by November 1st means have a completed application, which means everything on this screen has to be to us by November 1st. A lot of information I just gave to you. Please feel free to, ask clarifying questions. We can come back to it. Refer back to this whole spiel. That's going to be available to you. It's being recorded. So, you can refer back to this if you're not sure. If you have a completed application by November 1st, you will get a decision notification in late January, by February 1st at the latest. And then you have plenty of time until May 1 to determine whether or not you're going to attend UMD. You don't even have the regular decision deadlines up here, because if you're serious about coming to UMD, you should be applying November 1. It's really that simple. Okay. This is kind of what I was just saying, but these are links to things like the freshman application requirements. It's available to you at all times. It is very important that you keep on top of what you are responsible for, because like I said, as in a perfect world, we would be able to reach out to every student that applied to us and go, we need this, 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 and this before the application deadline. The reality of the situation is, with the volume of applicants that we have, we literally cannot do that. And it's not possible for us to do that. So it is very important that you keep on top of what you need. If you need an English proficiency requirement, there are 3 exams that we accept, which is the TOEFL, the Duolingo, and the IELTS exam. There are information in the second QR code here as to who might be required to submit an English language proficiency test and what you need to do in order to submit that exam. If you're required to submit that sort of exam, that is also due by the November 1st deadline. So everything has to be in by November 1st. All right. This is what we're actually looking at when we review your application. There are 24 factors on the screen. There are 2 things you'll notice are not on the screen. That is demonstrated interest and legacy alumni status. The demonstrated interest one, I want to really point out, while you probably have the opportunity to visit College Park and go on a tour if you so desire, I strongly recommend that you do that. I think it's a great resource. It's a great opportunity to get to know campus a little bit. But you do not need to, for example, send me an email telling me that you have visited campus. And the reason that I recommend against doing that is because I just told you on the last slide that if you have a question, if you're not sure whether you need to submit something or not, that's when you should email me. So I want to be able to as quickly as possible, respond to students who are asking me questions about, do I need to submit this? Have you received this? Am I complete? Those sorts of questions are time sensitive and very important. And I want to be able to get through those students and not have to worry about, hi, my name is so-and-so and I visited campus and I thought it was great, which is great. I'm glad you thought it was great. I don't need to know that you thought it was great, because we don't consider demonstrated interest in the review process. These other things we do consider. So a lot of this is going to be built into your sort of academic sort of transcript, things like that, your endeavors, your grades in academic subjects, your high school achievement, your progression of performance. So that means your grade trend. How do your grades look 9th grade versus 10th grade versus 11th grade, right? There are things that may or may not apply to you on this list, right? Class rank, for example. Montgomery County generally does not rank. That's okay. It's just one thing we're not considering. There are schools in the state and in the country that do rank. And then we will consider that when it's available to us. But if it's not available to us, it doesn't help. It doesn't hurt you. SAT scores, again, optional. Everything else, most everything else on here is going to be things that we learn about you from your activities, from your letters of recommendation, from your essays, and from your short answer questions. So there's a lot of things that we can consider and that we want to consider. The more information you provide us, the better picture we can get of who you are and your talents and your experiences and your interests, the better sort of opportunity we have to make a well-rounded decision, which is what our aim is to do, is to consider all of these things, and, sort of come to a decision based on all of these factors. It is very important that I point out to you that there is no single one thing that will get you admitted to UMD or that will get you denied from UMD. It's not that simple. That's just not how the process works. It is always an amalgamation of factors. It's always a combination of different things that we are looking for. It's not a checklist where if you meet XYZ, you're in. If you don't have XYZ, you're out. Or if you have X, you're out. Like, it's not that simple, which I know can make it confusing and difficult to understand, like, where do I sit in this whole thing? I know that's difficult, but it is what we have found works best for us in considering all of these different things. So there's, like I said, some of this may apply to you, some of it may not. If you don't have, an English second language or language spoken at home, that does not mean that it hurts you to have or not have those things. It's just another thing that we consider, right? We are able to consider all of these things when we're reviewing applications. Okay. I'm almost sort of done here, and then we can have a couple of minutes for some questions. This is the numbers I was talking about here. I just want to throw these up so you guys have an understanding of where UMD is sitting over the last 10 years or so. You can see the numbers in applications. You can see the admitted enrolled from the last 3 years, and the differences and things like that. This does not have the fall 2025 data just yet, because that data is not yet finalized, but this is the most up-to-date. This is all publicly available information. You can find this on our website. So this is here for you right here, right now, but this is all also, information that you can look up online. It is not a secret. It is publicly available on our website. But I think it's worth noting, you see that jump in applications. When people talk about, oh, UMD is harder to get into now, when we jump from 32,000 applications to 50,000 applications in 1 year, that's a really big jump. And you'll notice our number of enrolled students has not jumped that high. It's jumped a little bit, but nowhere near as significantly, because we want to enroll around the same amount of students that we have been for the last 10 years, and so things like that. I mentioned earlier I had the middle 50% for those SATs and ACT scores. Those are on the board right now. The fall of 2024's middle 50% for the SAT was a 1410 to a 1520, and for the ACT was a 32 to a 35. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about whether or not you want to submit your test scores. Like I said, it will not hurt you to not submit a score. If you're towards the bottom of that range or below it, I would consider maybe not submitting a score. If you're towards the top or above it and you feel confident, you feel good about your score, you feel it's a good representation of you as a student, you can choose to submit that score if you so choose. I want to again reiterate, if you submit your score, we will use it. We will consider it as a factor in our application, our review, and we will also consider it as a factor in our merit scholarship review. In particular, if you choose to submit them. So something to keep in mind. The data, again, this is right here for you. You'll hear me repeat it. You'll hear other people from UMD repeat it. Again, it's here for you. You can refer back to this, but we will also, you can find this online as well. So things to keep in mind as far as that is concerned. The last little bit I'm going to talk about here before I get into some questions is sort of financial aid stuff. We don't have deadlines on things for the next year's financial aid need-based things just yet, because it is still June. So, but generally FAFSA becomes available in October. If you're interested in need-based financial aid, you will want to submit that FAFSA form by the priority deadline, which is usually in January, but it could be moved depending on other factors and things like that. Merit-based scholarships, I mentioned earlier. Those are, you get automatic consideration as long as you apply by the November 1st deadline. Merit-based scholarships are academic information only. So that means your high school transcript, if you have dual enrollment transcripts, all that sort of academic grade performances, and SAT scores or ACT scores, if you have chosen to admit them. If your sort of extracurriculars are not taken account with merit scholarships, your, sort of things like that. It's purely your academic, based on academic merit. That is what merit scholarships are reviewed for. The last thing I want to mention on merit scholarships, and this gets confusing as well, is that your admissions decision, if you apply early action, will come out in late January by February 1st. Your merit scholarship decisions do not come out with that admissions decision. We do that scholarship review happens at a different time than admissions review, so they come out a couple of weeks later. We don't send you a letter if you don't get a merit scholarship. I think that would be kind of mean. We don't do that. You will only be notified if you receive a merit scholarship. Okay, I know there were quite a lot of chatter in the chat, and I believe we have about a little bit less than 10 minutes left in our session right now. So that's it from me. Again, if you have additional questions that we don't get to answer in the next couple of minutes, Apply Maryland is always there for you. Also, that's our phone number if you ever want to give us a call.
I think I answered, I went through and answered pretty much all the questions. I know Sarah answered a couple too, but the question about the 25th percentile for the SAT score, you have to keep in mind, that's for students who submitted their scores.
Yes, that's a great point. That's a great point, Kate. That is for students who chose to submit their scores. So that is only the 50% of students who did submit their scores. Of course, those are ranging higher because the students who are submitting those scores are those students who are achieving high scores. That's a really great point to keep in mind.
Yep. Are there any other questions? I think that I answered every single question in here. I know your school quite well, so let's see. They won't tell you this. What percent of MCPS students are admitted and how many go? I know you can't tell us
Different. It's different from every high school. That's the reality, is and it's different every year. It's not a specific percentage that we're like, okay, this high school gets this percentage, this high school gets that percentage. It's just not how the process works. Every high school in Montgomery County last year had above a 30% acceptance rate, which is around what our sort of averages sit in the 30 to 35%. Some a little bit higher, but none were above 30 or below 30% last year. I don't have specific numbers. I just don't have specific numbers, but that's a sort of general idea.
Thank you. Can you talk briefly about Honors College, College Park Scholars, FIRE, those special programs?
Absolutely. So we have a number of different programs we call LLOSPs, Living Learning and Other Special Programs. So all of those programs you just mentioned will fall under that category. So our University Honors College, College Park Scholars, our Carillon Communities, as well as the FIRE and BioFire programs. Some of these are living learning programs. So you might live with a cohort. Some of them are just sort of cohort programs where you don't necessarily live with them. The vast majority of them are first year specific programs. I think, generally speaking, if you are invited to join one of these programs, I strongly encourage that you do so. I think it's a great tool to help you transition into college from high school. It's a sort of gives you a cohort, it gives you peer mentorships, and this is true for all of them, peer mentors, faculty mentors, smaller sort of group opportunities, allows you to sort of build a community based specifically around like one specific thing. To go into them, I won't go too in specifics because there's a lot of programs, but the Honors College is, of course, for the most academically competitive students. The exact percentage of students who are admitted to the Honors College changes every year. I don't know last year's numbers off the top of my head, unfortunately, but for none of these programs are there additional steps that you need to do to indicate interest or to, sort of apply to these programs. All of these, you are automatically considered for all of these programs within the admissions review, as long as you apply by November 1st. So the Honors College, College Park Scholars, they do all of those things. I know sometimes it can be a little confusing. What's the difference between honors and scholars? The way I sort of like to put it is honors is your traditional sort of, in many ways, a traditional honors college, what you might think of. Scholars is very similar to that in many ways, but it is an interdisciplinary. They are looking for students who are interested in interdisciplinary learning, I would say, for scholars. Carillon Communities, there's a wide variety of different topics or ranges that they might invite you to join. And then FIRE, which there is both FIRE, which is the first year innovative research experience. That's what FIRE stands for. And there is also BioFire, which is, I think, a little bit self-explanatory, but it's specifically those first year research experiences for students interested in the biological sciences. The vast majority of these programs fire and biofire specifically, but also most of the time scholars, honors, and Carolina Communities are by and large first year programs. So you'll do them your first year. Some of them in honors and scholars and things like that extend beyond your freshman year. They vary depending on the program that you're in, but they may go on there's also opportunities for leadership involved in these students. Sort of like I said, peer mentorship is something that we certainly see these students come back and do, and all of those sorts of things. I think they're really great programs. I really, really strongly encourage students to get involved in them if they are invited to. There is a self-nomination process if you are not invited to these programs. Some are more likely than others. For example, the Honors College obviously is a bit more competitive. So while you can sort of raise your hand to be like, I would like to be looked at again for honors, there is sometimes an opportunity to do that for honors and scholars. It is still kind of competitive for those programs, but you are, for the Honors College, able to reapply into the Honors College during sort of at the end of your freshman year. So that's worth keeping in mind. Fire and biofire, there is an opportunity for self-nomination. That's not to say everybody who self-nominates then gets invited to fire and biofire and things like that, but there is an opportunity for self-nomination in the spring after you get an admissions decision if you are interested in participating and did not get invited.
Thank you. All right, we're just coming up on time, but I'm just going to stress a couple points because I've been working with Marilyn for a long time. One, apply by November 1st. Okay, the majority, over 95%, probably 90 to 95% of applicants that are admitted apply early action. So apply by November 1st. Make sure that your test scores, if you are going to submit them, make sure that they are received by November 1st. They have to be sent directly from College Board or from ACT. We do not send those scores. They have to be received by one of those two agencies. If you have not taken English all 4 years of high school, and you were an ESOL student, even in 9th grade, and you speak English beautifully, you still have to submit a TOEFL or Duolingo test. But again, by November 1st, that is on you, not us.
Hey, can I clarify something about the early deadline? University of Maryland is not going to send you an email on October 30th saying things are incomplete. It is up to the student to go into your account and see that things are there. This happens every year. Students find out after November 1 that a teacher letter didn't get there or the transcript didn't get there. They have 60,000 students. They're not emailing you following up. So it's 100% on students to make sure documents are there.
That is correct. Anything you want to add, Katja, and then I'll let you go.
No, I just want to reiterate that if you are unsure if something is there, you can, and please do, reach out to us, give us a call, send me an email, all that kind of stuff. We will check if things are there for you. But if you wait until after the deadline, there's nothing we can do at that point. Again, I want to reiterate, what your counselors have said, what I said earlier. Those deadlines are really important. Set yourself up for success by, one, requesting those things nice and early. Don't wait until the last minute. Give your counselors get lots of requests, both for sending stuff to UMD, but for many other places as well. Give us all, help everybody out by doing it early rather than later. And that also gives you the opportunity to, again, check your portal, make sure things are there. If you're not sure, gives you time to reach out for us. All that sort of stuff. Don't get yourself in trouble by just not paying attention.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you. We had a good group here. Thank you all for joining. And we look forward to seeing you in the fall. Thank you, Katja.
Of course. Thanks for having me, guys. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.